And now in brief, we'll talk a little bit about what Professor Rowlett has covered on Monday's lecture. But we'll be doing this by means of watching some video clips, and then you guys will break off into some breakout rooms, and then there will be a list of discussion questions that are posted in Canvas. So what I need each and every one of you to do right now is to log into your Canvas and to pull up your discussion board for our American Federal Government class, because it has the 3 sets of questions that you guys will be answering when we break out. So I want to make clear, we're going to put you guys in breakout rooms. When you go in your breakout room, you must either have your camera on or your microphone unmuted, because you should be having a discussion with your group. And the discussion board is in place for you to post your responses on. You guys can either do that by individually posting things, responding back and forth to your classmates throughout this whole entire section, or one person can record them down. I would highly encourage, though, that you post something throughout this whole lecture meaningful to what we'll be talking about. So just pay attention when we get to that point. But again, before we start, I need each and every one of you to pull up that on Canvas right now and have it ready, because you'll be using it, okay? All right. You got it, Leandra.
Okay, so hello everyone. So just to give a quick overview of the first video we'll be watching, it'll be an interview with John Lewis. If you're not familiar with who this is, John Lewis was a Congress member in the state of Georgia. He was from the state of Alabama, and he was very involved in the civil rights movement that took place in the 1960s. This is actually a lot of what he'll be reflecting on in terms of, doing like a lot of civil disobedience, is what he liked to also coin as good trouble. He's most famously known for the Selma marches, where they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge in order to protest and advocate for voting rights. A lot of people may also know this instance as Bloody Sunday, which also resulted in a lot of violence. So in this video, he'll be reflecting a lot on this. So be thinking about things such as like civil disobedience, as that'll be a part of the discussion questions following.
I just thought during that period, it was just too much, too many funerals, and some of us would say, how many more?
How you doing, sir?
It's a pleasure.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you as well.
Congressman Lewis, it's truly an honor to be in your presence and to be able to meet you face to face. When you think back to that bridge, when you think back to that moment, is there anything in particular that kind of stands out to you?
Walking across the bridge in Selma on March 7, 1965, for the right to vote. When I think about it, 50 years later, that Black people could not register to vote, could not participate in the democratic process. The scars and stains of racism are still deeply embedded in American society. They're there, they're real. Sometimes I hear people say nothing has changed. And on the other hand, I said, for those who said nothing has changed, I said, come and walk in my shoes. Growing up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, I saw those signs that said white men, colored men, and I would ask my mother, ask my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents why. They would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way. Don't get in trouble. I went off to school when I was 17, and later I got involved in studying the way of peace, the way of love, studying the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. Then I started sitting in at lunch counters.
We stayed there at the lunch counter studying and preparing our homework because we were denied service. The manager ordered that the lunch counters be closed, that the restaurants be closed. We just sit there and we continue to sit all day long.
I met Rosa Parks when I was 17. At the age of 18, I met Martin Luther King Jr. Changed my life. Dr. King said from time to time, hate is too heavy a burden to bear. We're not born hating people. We don't come into this world hating people. We're taught to hate them. We're taught to put people down because of their race, their color, their nationality. We have to teach people to love. That's what the movement, it was a movement of love, a movement of faith, a movement of hope, that you believe somehow, in some way, it's all gonna work out. You know, in the process, we may get arrested and go to jail, we may be beaten and left bloody, unconscious, may almost die. I thought I was gonna die on that bridge. I thought I was going to die during that freedom ride, but I didn't give up. I kept.
All right. I'm not sure what's going on here. I'll stop my screen share. Okay, so I'm not sure what's going on with the video, but the remainder part of the video just goes on to explain.
It's like getting involved in a holy crusade. It became a badge of honor.
So what advice do you have for student activists like myself and others who are contributing to the movement right now?
My advice to student activists and to all of the wonderful young people, study the lesson of the early civil rights movement. Read the literature, watch the video, watch Eyes on the Prize. We all must bear witness to what we think and believe is the truth. But when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up and speak out and make a little noise and find a way to get it away. You may get in trouble, but it's good trouble.
That's pretty much the end of the video anyway. Like you said, you watch videos, you read about it, and that's what we're doing today, having a discussion on that. So we are going to put you guys into some breakout rooms. Again, you guys are going to be going over the discussion questions that are posted in Canvas already. So everyone has a copy of that, but they will be flashing soon as this catches up. Here we go. So we'll be putting in your discussion groups. Be sure to have your camera on and you be discussing within your groups, and then post on that discussion board in Canvas, and we'll be active in there. You guys will be in your groups for about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll bring you guys back and we'll move on to the next section of the lecture. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. There will be a fellow in one of your groups in and out, so be aware of that.
I've opened the rooms. You've been invited. Go to your room. There should be about 6 of you in each one. Okay, fellows, pop in and out.
Hello.
Where are people? Anybody home?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't know what you're doing?
I think so. Is it the questions that are highlighted in blue on the discussion?
Yes, and the ones
Okay.
that she
Oh,
just
actually,
put
I
up.
see them.
Yeah. Define
Okay.
civil disobedience. How is it effective? Are there any disadvantages to civil disobedience? So y'all work together on that and kind of figure that out and all that kind of stuff. So you'll need to know this. Any questions?
I'm good. I don't have any questions if anybody else doesn't.
Okay, make sure they talk. I'm gonna move
Okay.
around.
Correct.
Oh, y'all know what you're doing?
Okay, we're talking about set 1. Eric, this is Kate, by the way.
Oh, okay. Y'all are 2 on 1 Zoom. Which one are you
Yeah.
doing?
Okay, we're talking about set 1.
Mm-hmm. Define civil disobedience.
Yes. So civil disobedience to me means like refusing to like act on a certain law just because it's like as a protest, because like let's just say, okay, tell me if this is correct. So you're like, because I'm a certain race, I'm supposed to pay a certain tax when like other races don't need to pay like a certain tax. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's when you could add when you morally object to an unfair law.
Yes. Okay.
You got that?
Yes.
Say that when you go back out, because she'll probably ask people.
Okay, say it one more time for
the slow people.
Yeah.
Yeah, for Brooke.
Hey.
Civil disobedience to me, now you can change this, is when you disregard a law that you morally object to due to its discriminatory nature. That's what I think it is. Makes sense?
We are still having trouble. Disregarding a certain law.
Yeah, that you deem, or disregard a certain law that you morally believe is discriminatory. I know there's some words.
Oh no, she was not.
I'll make sure she asks you.
Okay. No.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I got it right here. So.
Oh, good. Well, I got to go to a different breakout room. I actually have to do work. See y'all later. Anybody home?
Yes, sir.
What do y'all think?
Like civil disobedience is like a form of peaceful protest.
Yeah. Against what?
Well, in this case, it's like in response to like racism and unequal rights.
Oh yeah, discriminatory laws. Caitlin, you got anything?
I was just saying the same thing that he was saying.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So y'all continue discussing. Got about 5 minutes left. And I'm going to I have to go to all the different rooms. So I got to move to the next one. Got to figure out which one I haven't been to. But yeah, really kind of hit on those points that you all see. So I'm off to another room.
Yeah, the issue is also getting it started because, there has to be that first person or that first group to really set out there and start something like that, like with, Rosa Parks with the Montgomery bus sit-in. So,
good. Y'all are doing good? Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Good. Any questions?
Not so far.
Oh, good. Good. That's what we like. Moving around. Crickets.
I would say that like even though like in theory peaceful protests are like constitutional, sometimes they are shut down and not allowed. So I guess that would be a disadvantage.
Yeah, a disadvantage might also be if it's like.
What about people using fire hoses to spray you down, causing your skin to peel back? That seems like a disadvantage too. civil disobedience, right?
Yeah, well, that could be a disadvantage to a
Wait,
lot
did
of
that
things.
actually happen?
Yes, that actually happened during the civil rights era. In Montgomery, Alabama, and Birmingham, Alabama, the fire departments were called out to disrupt crowds. And when they use those fire hoses, they have so much pressure they can peel your skin off. You didn't learn about that in other classes, but I'll tell it to you. So, yeah, there's disadvantages. People are killed, people are beaten, all those kind of things. So, things to think about. I'm going to move to a different room. Okay, is this my smart group?
Yeah. Right.
Maybe.
Probably.
You know what you're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah. We just discussed all the answers to the questions, and then the other TA, Joy, just came in.
Oh, good.
He asked her some questions.
What are some downfalls to discrimination? You have any?
To discrimination or civil disobedience?
Oh, civil disobedience, excuse me.
Got it. Like going to jail, getting beaten.
Yeah.
Hate crimes. Yeah, it's dangerous.
Yeah. Not easy stuff. Things that we'll never have to probably deal with in our lives.
Yeah.
I think that's something to remember.
And it takes a lot of time and energy where like someone can commit their whole life to it and not be able to see a lot of the change that comes from it.
Yeah, that is interesting. So I'm gonna move off to another room, but good job. Keep up the good work. How are you scholars doing?
Good. We just finished.
Oh, good. This is like the dark room. Everybody's got their lights off. Claire, what'd you get since you're one of my students?
We got our discussion post is posted, but I couldn't have my mic on because my air purifier sounds like a freaking jet engine. So we've been talking through the chat.
Oh, I can't even hear it.
Well, it's very loud to me, so.
Well, Zoom will take out background noise. So anyways, civil disobedience. What are some negative effects? 13 seconds, go.
I mean, somebody can get hurt, obviously, and someone pointed out in our group that it can quickly devolve into violence on either side of the equation.
Yep, bingo. There we go. Off we go.
All right, everybody should be close to being back. I just want to give you guys a reminder, when you're in your breakout groups, the questions that are listed in Canvas, you should be going over as a group discussing them, either through the chat or with your cameras and microphones on. And then over in the discussion board in Canvas, you'll post your responses on what you guys have discussed. And then you'll have an opportunity to respond back and forth to your classmates, either agreeing or maybe disagreeing and giving evidence on why you disagree on certain things. But it's for you guys to have a discussion as we work through this lecture. All right, so we'll go ahead and keep moving forward. You got it, Leandre.
Okay, yeah, so for this next video that'll be playing, it's sort of a transition from the previous video, because at the end, they started talking a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement and just current movements today. So the next video will be talking a lot about the history of the Black Lives Matter movement, how it got started, what inspired it. It also touched on a lot of things that made it successful. So when you're watching this video, be thinking a lot about some similarities and some differences between the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Lives Matter movement, and what contributed to the global success of the Black Lives Matter movement as well.
The presidential campaign of Barack Obama awoke the spirit of American youth in a way that was similar to what we had seen. I think that's what kind of put the gap back together. And then the horrors began. Trayvon Martin happened, Michael Brown happened, and Sandra Bland happened, Renisha McBride happened. It kept happening, and Black Lives Matter happened.
Black Lives Matter started in July 2013 after the acquittal of George Zimmerman, and many of us were disturbed, concerned, angry that George Zimmerman was let off for the murder of Trayvon Martin. Alicia Garza wrote a love note to Black people on social media, and she closed it off with Black Lives Matter. And the moment I saw those 3 words, I hashtagged them.
Black Lives Matter is super diverse. We have tons of folks of all different races who are involved and contributing, but definitely the leadership is Black.
So I think that the movement space has been really thoughtful about amplifying many voices, so it won't be a kill the leader, kill the movement space, right? There'll be so many people pressing this, and that when you go out to a protest, you don't know who a protester is, because everybody, like it's such a broad group of people. I think that's been sort of intentional work across the country.
We are now in the Black Lives Matter movement building in our own communities, our freedom schools again, and breakfast programs and things like that, where we're actually building up our own communities, and that's actually part of the revolution. Ferguson absolutely changed this country. I think the uprising of folks in communities who said we're not going to take this kind of violence, and people actually coming and standing behind them and saying we're not going to take it either, and the understanding that Ferguson is everywhere, I think is what's allowing this movement to grow the way that it has.
I think it's bigger than the civil rights movement because civil rights really says it's a domestic issue. For us, this is the new human rights movement. The reason why we want to call it a human rights movement is because that's international in scope. That allows for us to have a conversation that's beyond US borders.
When Mike Brown was killed and Officer Darren Wilson was not indicted, in Toronto, we had over 3,000 people come out. In London, they also had over 3,000 people come out. We saw hashtags coming out from Palestine to Ferguson, and they were exchanging information on Twitter around how to neutralize tear gas. So we saw the implications go worldwide. The reality is Black people are everywhere, and what we're not talking about is just police brutality. What we're talking about is anti-Black racism, and the implications of that are global, and because Black people are global, the movement too is global.
All right, so we will hop over to our second set of discussion questions. You guys will be put into your breakout rooms again. Remember, you guys should be discussing this together and then individually finding some meaningful way to post to that discussion board and Canvas and be discussing back and forth you guys' thoughts on these questions. All right.
We have a guest in our room.
So what are you guys thinking for the first one, the influencing social movements?
I guess
You're muted.
Well, that's why nobody can hear me. Gosh, embarrassing. Not the first time that's happened. Anything going on in here? Y'all know what you're doing?
Okay, so we're working on set 2, correct?
Correct. The ones that just came up, which are, what are some ways the civil rights movement has influenced social movements in the 21st century? They're tough questions. Oh, here's a good one. What are some similarities and differences between BLM and civil rights movement? You got anything? Come on, Kate, you're smart. Or Sarah, you're one of my students. Come on.
They're both social movements for minority groups.
True. Do they both have clearly defined goals?
Roughly. To just get
Think
like
so? Oh, he gave up. The smartness meter went away.
Yeah, they do.
They do. Why would you say so?
Civil rights wanted equal protection and equal voting rights.
Correct.
And then BLM would like to stop police brutality.
Correct. Those are some interesting things. Though I would say that the Black Lives Matter is not as clearly defined because it doesn't have a policy attached to it. You could argue that. Talks about police brutality, but what is police brutality and can you pass a piece of legislation to fix it? What would that look like? Make sense?
Yep.
Interesting. Good. Well, y'all keep working away, and I got to move to another breakout room. Off we go. Howdy, Nick. Are you doing all the work in here?
No.
Okay, good. Because I'll throw them out if they're not.
Okay. No, everyone's participating.
Okay, good, good. That's what we like. Do you think there's differences between Black Lives Matter and civil rights movement?
Yes.
Wait, let me see his house.
Do what? Yes.
I think there are differences in the goals. I mean, the civil rights movement was mainly so, I mean, they couldn't vote. They were separated so deeply. The Black Lives Matter movement is a little bit of a more general movement, I think, not specifically fighting for like one law to be in place or anything. It's more so as like a generalization of the way that Black people have been mistreated.
Very good. I said that to the last group.
Yeah, and I think police brutality is a tangible thing that they're that Black Lives Matter is fighting for, because that definitely needs to be changed. But
what does that mean for policy? What does that look like? You know,
I think they've a lot of Black Lives Matter participants have vocalized the ways that we could, defund the police and, advocate for social workers to be a bigger part of police, like, just different ways that the police can be mobilized to be more effective and not, I mean, that's a tangible thing that they could do.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good. Yeah, because I think the police question is very ambiguous. What does it mean to defund the police? Because some of them say, no, don't defund the police. Some say, do defund the police. Some say, well, we need social workers, all that kind of stuff. And, for most Americans, they need simple, very simple points to policy. And with civil rights, it was voting for all.
Yeah.
But Black Lives Matter, it's a whole strewn of things. And, how do you easily communicate that? So anyways, I'm off to the next room. So continue. Crickets. Anybody here?
Yeah, we had just finished a conversation. We're about to move on to the next.
Oh, okay. So what are the differences?
The differences,
social media and how that affected BLM, because that's another platform to just reach way more people that the civil rights movement didn't have at the time.
Yeah, faster. Do you think that's as good?
Yeah. Also the ability to like control their own narrative, since back in the 60s, all the major media outlets were a lot more on the same page, especially about the civil rights movement. And so social media has given minorities a better voice to voice their own opinions to the public.
Yeah. Which one do you think is more effective? And why? That would be interesting.
Like which form of protest, like social media or
No, which is more effective, the Black Lives BLM or civil rights movement?
Civil rights.
Why?
Yeah.
I feel like
Because-
with the internet, a lot of like stuff can get misconstrued. It's like if you only post about all the violence that BLM is doing, then you're gonna get a bunch of people that are against them. So it depends on what you're seeing, right?
What about
Like,
policy? Policy.
Yeah.
What did the civil rights movement want?
Desegregation.
Well, that
Equality.
had already happened, but that was early part of it. What was it?
Equality.
Equality
Even though they-
where?
Racial equality.
No, where did they want that equality? There's one spot they really wanted it. Ooh, big question.
Workplace.
Well, there's that. Yeah, that was a big part.
Education.
Yeah, starts with a V. Civil rights, Joy. We're talking civil rights.
Awesome, good, perfect. I'll hop out of here, okay? We'll be
Okay.
done in the next minute and a half, so just kind of wrap it up.
Yeah. Anyways, the area where the civil rights movement wanted the biggest push policy-wise was voting. Remember, they wanted to get rid of Monday's lecture. It'll be on Friday's essay. They wanted to get rid of
Clause.
the poll taxes, the literacy test, all that, because that's why they had the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So that was the big thing with civil rights. But what does BLM want, policy-wise?
Police brutality to go down.
What does that mean? Give me a policy that would do that.
You're not allowed to stop somebody for their color.
But we already have that.
No.
I feel like the policy is in place, just like it's not always followed or enforced if it's not follow.
Yeah, that's something with, I believe with the BLM is that it's a lot more ambiguous. Yes, it's pushing for good things, but is it a clear policy thing that needs to be changed? Thing to think about. Because Americans like simple things. So they want simple. We want voting rights. So always remember that. So I think we're going back into the main room in 29 seconds.
So I think people are entering back in. And once that happens, then I am going to take roll. So looks like we're pretty populated. Nope, we only have 4. A lot of people are still in their breakout rooms. I like seeing all your faces. Okay, I'm going to take roll. I think everybody's back in now, so I'm starting the timer. I'm taking roll. Get out your phones. I've turned my location off. It's started, okay? And then Leandre, it's over to you.
1 second, there's someone who has a hand raised. Do you have a question, Isabella? What's your question? All right.
Bella was talking away.
Okay. All right, you got it, Leandre.
Isabella,
cool.
you're muted.
Okay. All right. So the chart that you're seeing here actually is explaining the population of Black students that attended predominantly white schools in the South. And as you can see here at the bottom, it starts in 1954, goes all the way to 2011, and essentially is mapping the progress of integration. So as you can see at the beginning, Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, that's when schools were officially desegregated. And as you can see here, it's at zero, explaining the 0% of Black students attending white schools or predominantly white schools. And as you can see, for a decade, it's actually a very slow moving progress that we see in terms of schools being integrated. It doesn't actually happen until around the 80s that we reach a peak level of integration. And what's important about Board of Education of Oklahoma City versus Dow is that this case was originally decided in 1961, a local high school, Northeast High School, if you're familiar with it in Oklahoma City. It was desegregated through a Supreme Court case. What's important is that they revisited this case in 1991, and they officially declared that desegregation would not be required of schools. So things such as like busing, actually implementing like strict integration policies, all of these things will not be required so long as the schools met a current criteria of integration. The thing about this though is that obviously we see here that without forcing these schools to integrate, they slowly decline in terms of the progress of integration. So as you can see, we get all the way here at the end in 2011, the schools are just about as segregated as they were in the 60s. And this chart has continuously declined. So even like as we have now, like almost a decade later, we see that these numbers are still essentially the same. So it transitions me to the video that we'll be watching next. This is our last video. It'll talk a lot about the progress of desegregation and sort of the impact that segregation still has on us in the 21st century. So be thinking about these things when you're answering the discussion questions afterwards.
All right, and I just want to make a quick announcement just in case we run short out of time. If you guys are still in your discussion groups and class is over, you guys can finish talking and discussing among your group and then post on that Canvas board, discussion board, and then you guys are free to go unless you have any questions for us back in the main section with us discussing. So I just want to put that out there. And again, the questions for your discussion are on Canvas. They're not in this chat on Zoom. It is in Canvas. All right.
I'm raising really young children, and the world they've inherited is not the one that I wanted them to inherit. Voting rights are under attack. Police brutality is a real problem, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
You still have segregation across this country. You see communities where people are just isolated. You know, I live in Brooklyn, New York, which is one of the most diverse communities in America, but I can take you to places where people have never left their neighborhoods. It's almost as if it was 1955 all over again.
In certain things like housing, we've never really made that much progress in the first place. Housing is civil rights made personal, and until we break up housing segregation and make housing more equitable, I think we're never going to get as far as we have promised our citizens in terms of equality.
The question is whether or not there's been progress made in the field of education. The answer is that it's extremely complicated, right? It's yes and no. It is a sad reality that in too many communities throughout this country, a child's access to opportunity is predicted by genetic code or zip code. If you provide me with a map and a few data points, I can predict almost with fidelity whether or not a child will be placed on a birth to prison pipeline or a cradle to career pipeline.
While the U.S. economy is on somewhat of a recovery, in Black America, the economic recovery has yet to take hold.
When we talk about wealth gaps, it disproportionately impacts a certain group of people, Black and brown people, Hispanic and African American. It disproportionately impacts women. When you talk about a wealth gap, it disproportionately impacts people who live in either extraordinarily urban centers or extraordinarily rural centers.
What gives me hope in this moment, when it comes to a tough issue like police violence, all these young men are getting killed, is that the young activists have really struck something. The Black Lives Matter movement really struck something, which I think they have found the strategy that will ultimately end police brutality. Things could change and change dramatically because of the actions of people like myself and my neighbors and my family.
All right, here are you guys' last set of discussion questions. And again, you'll be put into your breakout rooms for another about, how much time we have left? About 8 minutes. So you guys will get an opportunity to discuss through these and respond on that discussion board. And then that will be what we have for you for today, unless you guys have any questions for us at the end.
I don't think so. As we saw in the chart, the schools today are almost as segregated as they were in the 60s, despite like these important court cases such as Brown versus Board of Education. I think that the government hasn't really done enough because we're back to where we were pretty much in the 60s.
Why are they segregated today? That's the big question. Why?
Because of like zip codes and where you live.
Kind of.
I feel like it's because they congregate as communities to protect themselves. I feel like that's like almost penguin theory, you know, power in masses.
Well, okay, I come from Edmond up here. That's where I lived. Back in the 70s, 80s, there was this thing called white flight from the Oklahoma City area. And it pushed all the white folk up to Oklahoma City or up here to Edmond. And that's continued to this day. It's kind of an interesting that some of those small policy things have done that. I don't know where that graph came from, but I would need to instigate it more. So there's that. I'll let y'all continue talking. So
Still going to do what they believe and what they want to do. So there's always going to be like that struggle of like people's opinions and what they want to do.
No, I think that's good. I think you guys make up a really good point that it is rather challenging to try to appease every single person in the United States. And so we definitely have come far from where we were at, but we definitely still have areas that we can increase in. So very good bringing that up. Anybody else in this group? What do you guys think? Carter, Faith, Sarah?
I have a question. Where did that graph come from?
You'll have to ask Leandre that question. That was his portion. So.
Oh, okay. That was my question. Oh, and the last group we were talking about, sorry, I'm just going to talk a lot. School choice and in Oklahoma City, I don't know if you knew, there was the white flight back in the 70s and 80s when people came out of Oklahoma City and moved up to Edmond. That's how Edmond grew, which was kind of interesting, keeping our schools segregated pretty much until today.
That is really interesting too. And I think it helps perspective, you know, the impact of what we're trying to share through this. So Carter, you were getting ready to share something?
I think that the government could do a better job at just listening to the community.
Obviously, you can't have everyone in it, I guess, because there's always those people.
Okay. Eric, if you want to, you can stay over in this group and kind of help facilitate discussion, and I'll hop out another one. But for you guys that did share,
are they struggling?
Yeah. But just kind of help them, you know, figure out they've answered the first question really well, especially Brooke. But they need to kind of talk a little bit more about the other two before we head out. So, but I'll hop over, so I'll let you do this.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm in charge. That's not good. Okay, what were the other two questions?
It says if yes, explain how, and if no, what could be done better.
Oh, do you think?
Well, you really only have to answer one, right? Because it's if you believe yes or no.
Correct. Which do you believe?
We basically said that like the federal government has there's been progress done. Like it's obviously gotten a lot better to where like we were at one point, but I feel like no matter what is being the government is doing, equality is never going to be 100% there because the government can't control everyone and what their actions. So I
Yeah.
feel like there's always going to be people that always
believe
don't-
differently,
Mhm.
and so they do differently. Like they
Well-
can put in laws
Well,
that
and
you can and can't do this, but at the end of the day, you can't change what somebody believes.
Well, true. And people don't always consider it with race. They may say, oh, I want my student to go to the school that has high achieving students, blah, 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 blah. And, well, that's the white school. So, I mean, they don't even say anything about race, but, they inherently say it kind of thing. So, good enough. I think that's all we have for today. So, enjoy your Starbucks.
Thank you.
Y'all have any questions? Anybody else?
Oh, yeah, wait, I do have a question. Are we supposed to submit a response on that discussion board for each set?
Melody said something. Hold on. Obviously, we're not paying attention. No.
Brooke submitted like a response to set
Oh.
1, but we didn't know if we were supposed to do it to set 2 and 3.
Yeah, each group should have a comment on each set of questions. One person can post and the other groups respond. Members respond.
Okay.
Whatever that means. So,
Okey-doke.
fun times. Okay, see y'all later. Party hard.
Always.
Yeah.
1 minute.
Dr. Rowlett, I have some questions about the test.
Sure.
Okay. First, is chapter 6 of Che gonna be on the test?
I'm sorry, what?
The chapter 6 quiz on the Chegg thing about like polling, is that gonna be on the test?
Is that the civil rights one on Cengage? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, Cengage, that's right. No.
Yeah, Chegg is where you cheat.
Oh, I guess
I'm
I got
joking.
my websites mixed up. No, the one about it talks about like polling. Is that going to be on the test?
No,
If you're doing something that has to do with polling, the one that just opened up, and it's not due till Monday,
Yeah.
then no, it's due on Monday. So it's not covered on the exam.
Okay.
So only the chapters that we have had due
1 through 5.
up to this point. The main thing that I would look at is I would go through the ones that you've already done. There's a test yourself that you can create your own tests. We pull most of our multiple choice questions from Cengage out of that test yourself, but not all of them. Some of them we pull also from those questions that are specifically posted. They are specifically posted on
on the Canvas.
on Canvas,
Those questions forums that come with every. Yep,
exactly.
I did those too.
And so those are also sources for you to look at to write your essay questions. But the more here's 3 answers and that's it. Those are going to be more likely to be multiple choice questions. So look at those, know those answers, but study your Cengage, do your self-tests, and that should really help.
I've actually taken all the quizzes and all the answers and I put them into one giant Quizlet. And I'm gonna go over them.
Perfect.
There was another question. So it's about the lemon test. One of the questions was, how does the lemon test accommodate religion rather than build a wall? And I know like the lemon test is basically like, a law has to have like a secular purpose to it in order to be enacted. So I guess, so would the answer be like, it's not like strictly like prohibiting a law that might have some religious connotations. It just has to have a purpose more than religion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's clearly accommodating religion if it has to have a secular purpose, but it can also have a religious purpose, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's it in and of itself. So the fact that laws or regulations, for example, closing liquor stores on Sunday, right? Why are liquor stores closed on Sundays? Because of religion. but also, you know, so that there's a day of rest for the community as a whole. That's the secular purpose behind that. There just has to be an identifiable secular purpose.
Okay. On the mass incarceration questions forum, it talked about Alexander and Lumen, and it talks about causes and outcomes of mass incarceration. Who are those people? I can't find them in the lecture.
Did that end up in the essay question?
I thought I removed that.
But it was on the questions forum on those that come with every lecture.
Okay. That's because Ella did not create a section of questions. And so just think about what she put up on her slides. We did not ask that as the essay question.
Okay.
As the essay question, we removed because she did not use the literature that I always use. The essay question, just think of it not as Alexander and Lumen, but think about it as, you know, what she put up specifically.
And my last question is, it talked the tactics of a nonviolent campaign. It doesn't specifically talk about this in the lecture notes, but I guess you would put down like the freedom rides, you know, the sit-ins that happened in white-only sections of bars.
I mean, we did talk about those in lecture. I know that we did, you know, I gave a list, but also I specifically, when we're talking about nonviolent campaign, I'm talking about the 4 steps too, right?
Yes. I got those, but that was, but the tactics, that was a separate part of the question. I was wondering if there was something specifically having to do with the tactics, like, and I have the steps down.
Okay, well, we do have, there is a slide up there that talks specifically about where it talks about the movement, and I'm thinking about the slide right now. I can see it, and I have pictures here, and there's Martin Luther King Jr., and I